Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unacademy, the one-stop destination for the civil services English medium aspirants. Welcome back to the daily Hindu analysis. We are covering a lot of topics for today, so stay with us. The topics that I've chosen from the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper, the four articles mentioned in the beginning will be done in an in-depth manner. A lot of discussion will be of the same. I've clubbed two articles which are on the same topic. The first two articles are around the topic of refugees, because 20th of June happens to be the World Refugee Day particularly, and therefore a lot of focus of today's newspaper was on the refugee crisis, also specifically in terms of what is India doing for the same. The other two articles, the torrid crisis and Indian cities and heat traps and heat waves, are around the extended period of heat waves that we are witnessing across northern India. What are the causes? What is the urban heat island effect? Those will be the consideration of these topics. So I've clubbed these two topics. That will be our focus. The other topics are very, very important in the context of prelims. Small pieces of news, but a lot of factual data, which we will do in terms of the other few topics which are for prelims. Before we begin, an important announcement. We are launching multiple batches in the coming days in different mediums. For instance, your bilingual medium, your English medium, as well as Hindi medium. You can have a fresh start to your preparation for 2025, and that is why the time is absolutely right for you to avail this offer, which is at 24,999. It's a 12-month subscription along with a 3 months extension that is free of cost. It is all inclusive. It will cover every aspect of your preparation, including the GS preparation, CSAT preparation, along with practicing by the test series. You will get a lot of access. For instance, if you are a full-time aspirant, you will not have to worry. If you're enrolled in a batch in the morning, you can enroll in a second batch in the evening and almost access 2 or multiple classes in one's daytime period. Make sure that if you need any more information, you call on this number and everything will be answered. Now let's dive into today's discussion with our first topic. The first topic is invisible suffering of Rohingya refugees. Now, will there be a particular question only on Rohingya refugees? And this article's focus was mainly about a very lacking area when it comes to assistance given to refugees, which is no access or no assistance is given when it comes to the area of mental health. They are suffering from a lot of trauma, the trauma related to displacement, the trauma related to the prosecution, the violence that they have faced in the countries that they are fleeing from. So this is the particular article referring to that. Now, can mental health for refugees alone be a question? I don't think so. Will Rohingya crisis only be a question? The probability is lesser. So in terms of what is the relevance and how do we extract the most important information, we have made our focus. We are directing our focus to, in general, the problems faced by refugees, and that will be the focus from this article. Mental health, the aspect of mental health or trauma being a subset of the problems faced by the refugees. So that is the agenda for this particular article. According to the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, that is UNHCR, there are about 22,000 refugees living in India, and these refugees, the Rohingya refugees, are fleeing conditions or prosecution because they are a religious minority. They are Muslims in a majority, Buddhist majority from Myanmar. So they are a victim of ethnic cleansing. A lot of military action has been taken. They were earlier residing in the Rakhine state, and they were not given full citizenship, equal rights as compared to the other citizens. So in order to escape that violence, that prosecution, they are fleeing to neighboring countries being Bangladesh and also countries being our nation, that is India. So we will focus, our focus will be on areas which have higher probability of being framed into an MCQ or in a mains related question, and this could be asked in maybe IR related question, that how does India deal with the problem of refugees, what is our problem at hand, and what can India be doing, or what is India already doing. So that is our focus. This is how we map our relevance from the article. Every word in the article is not important, and this is what we are here for. Let's begin. So what is a refugee? A refugee is someone who is forced to flee a particular country that they are originally residing in because they are escaping prosecution or persecution or war or violence in those areas. So conflict-ridden areas will lead to a refugee crisis. War in a particular area will lead to a refugee crisis. Ethnic cleansing or a lot of problems in terms of majority and minority, and persecuted minorities. For instance, a lot was in the news when it comes to also the Constitutional Amendment Act, the Citizenship Amendment Act, when we were giving a few minorities a lot of access or citizenship rights, easier citizenship rights, who are suffering from religious persecution. So those are refugees per se. So for instance, for refugee, this is our topic because I've already mentioned it's the World Refugee Day that happens to be on June 20th. Now, some principles that can be asked in PYQs, that what does this mean? Simply, for instance, even a total fertility rate, just the definition was asked in your prelims exam that happened recently. So in terms of refugee, in terms of the international law, a custom or a principle is recognized by most countries, which is the non-refoulement principle. The non-refoulement principle simply says that if you are a country and someone is seeking asylum in your country, you should not force them to go back to a country if you know that there is a possibility of danger, violence or persecution when the person returns to the country. So that is the principle of non-refoulement. That is, you do not return an asylum seeker if there is a possibility of danger with the same action. Clear? So please make sure that you know of this principle. Just one statement will be enough if at all there is a MCQ related question, not PYQ, I'm sorry, an MCQ related question based on the same. Now let's dive into the problems. Before we dive into the problems, it's important to note what are the crises, particularly when it comes to India. Where has India been receiving the refugees from? Who are the asylum seekers in India? So in general, even if you draw a simple map, an outline of India, and you mark this way, that which areas leading to which kind of refugee crisis, at least when it comes to our own country, that will be very, very beneficial in terms of the presentation also of your mains answers. So for instance, to begin with, Rohingyas face a lot of religious persecution, being a Muslim minority in a Buddhist majority country, that is Myanmar, and they were denied citizenship, equal access in terms of basic facilities, etc. in that country, Rakhine state. So they started, here is the migration. They would start migrating in areas of Bangladesh and in areas of India as well. Okay, so that is, and India has also supported Bangladesh for assistance for Rohingyas. For instance, we are also helping them develop the Bhashan Char island, which was basically used as a habitation to basically keep the Rohingyas. So that is the Rohingya crisis in the northeastern region particularly. There obviously we have historically battled a big crisis or a migrant crisis when we witnessed partition. There was a huge inflow of Hindus from the divided country, the newly established country that was Pakistan, and that was also a big crisis that we had seen. The Tibetans also are also a lot of refugees that are coming to India after the occupation of the Tibetan region by China. In fact, that the Tibetan Parliament in exile, the location of that is in India, in Dharamshala. Okay, so Tibetans are also a focus. Sri Lankan Tamils, of course, were facing a lot after the civil war broke out. They faced a lot of violence, ethnic violence by the majority Sinhalese population, and therefore they are fleeing the areas of Sri Lanka and coming back to areas of Tamil Nadu. So that is a linguistic related persecution per se. Okay, the Chakmas of course are the lesser known but of course very important. The Chakmas are also refugees. They are refugees, they are Buddhist refugees who are coming from a country which was in term a Muslim majority. That is, after the creation of Bangladesh, they felt threatened, and therefore they started migrating from the Chittagong region. Here is the Chittagong region to states such as Mizoram, Tripura, and a lot of them are also right now situated or are residing in Arunachal Pradesh. So that is the Chakmas also as refugee. Even if you draw a map like this, it is very, very good in terms of summing up the refugee problem when it comes to India and the bordering countries, and in fact also considering this as South Asia. Yes. Now let's dive into what are the problems in general, the problems associated. The first and the foremost problem is that in order to access any basic facilities, generally any welfare facilities that are provided by any governments, you need to be a citizen of that country. You need to have adequate documentation. For instance, in India, a lot of services are given after you are basically showing your Aadhaar card. A lot of DBT payments are based on that kind of a recognition. So they are denied even basic facilities, basic necessities that are important for human dignity, for human survival. For instance, proper access to food, nutrition, water, and even shelter. So they are mostly sent to these camps where they are cramped up, or a lot of population is residing in very unhygienic, cramped, cluttered places, thereby leading to also higher incidence of diseases. So these are of course the first and the foremost problem, lack of basic necessities owing to any documentation, owing to the government is responsible for their own citizens. So these people generally are called stateless citizens or stateless migrants. So they are generally left out when it comes to the benefits of the welfare schemes. The second is lack of livelihood and employment. Because of lack of legal status, there is difficulty in basically finding employment, in basically finding a job, which leads to a further cycle, perpetuating the cycle of poverty. So not getting a job will lead to more poverty will lead to more economic dependence, and therefore lead to a lot of distress. So second problem is lack of livelihood and employment opportunities. The third problem is the limited access to education and healthcare. The main parameters, the main dimensions of human development, basic rights of healthcare are also sometimes not provided. Healthcare is sometimes considered very expensive. They need to provide a lot of documents, for instance, your UN refugee cards, for availing a lot of healthcare services. So this can be considered as a simple violation of human rights. Okay, arbitrary detention. So there is a lot of ad hoc arrangement. They do not have a sense of security even if they have crossed a border into a different country. They are not safe there as well. They are asked a lot of questions. They are required to prove when did they come, how did they flee into the country, how did they enter the country, and a lot of them, if they are unable to answer, give proper details, are sent to detention camps or are even in the danger of being deported back to their country. So arbitrary detention and deportation are generally problems associated with refugees. They of course face a lot of stress also because they are separated from families. One person of a family would be sent to a detention camp, etc. Social discrimination and violence is very important for you to understand. There is generally a problem with the entry of outsiders, a classic example being your Assam Accord. There was a problem with the incoming of the migrants from Bangladesh because people felt threatened that their resources are limited and the entry of outsiders will add to more stress on the already prevailing resources, for instance, land. So there was a movement that was against the entry of outsiders into parts of India. Even the protests related to for instance, your citizenship amendment bill. So there is generally a problem. There is a difference in culture between the local population and the refugees that are coming up. And because of those differences, there are often instances of discrimination, often instances of violence, and so on. So they are victims of social discrimination and violence because the local population feels threatened, or they feel that the resources, they will have to compete more for the already existing resources, whether it's job, whether it's land, whether it's water resources, etc. So that is a big problem, and that is why the migrants or the refugees are always seen in a bad light by the local population. That also hinders their adaptability in these new countries. Of course, the last but not the least, the problem that the article was addressing, but there is very less chances that only a mental health problem of refugees will be framed into a full-fledged question, which is why I put this as a subtopic to the bigger topic of problems. Psychological trauma, of course, they have fled such instances of violence, of hate crime, of ethnic cleansing. There is a lot of anxiety attached to them about what will happen. Will they be put to a detention camp? Will they have to prove a lot of documents? Will they be deported back? They fear losing their life in the process. They are separated from their families. That also leads to an increase in depression in the refugees, and of course a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. They constantly will have those instances repeated in their minds, and they cannot forget what has happened to them. So that is the major issues, the basic problems that are the refugees are particularly facing. Okay, now after this, let's come to another article which is also based on the refugees, but the context or the focus of this article is a little different. We will dive into it in full depth, so don't worry. The article is Blueprints Beyond Borders for Solace and Shelter. Basically, the focus of this article and what the writer is wanting to debate in this article is that there is a need for signing the UN Refugee Convention of 1951, which India is not a part of. India has not signed the UN Refugee Convention of 1951. This can also be a prelims MCQ, so make sure that you remember these facts. India does not also have a proper law, a dedicated legislation dealing with refugees, or what is the criteria, what are the obligations on the state, what is a proper process, a SOP that will be followed when it comes to providing benefits to the refugees. So there is not a law, and we've not even signed a international convention which is the UN Refugee Convention. So in this context, let's debate, and this can be a possible question, and that is why I've added all the arguments in the coming slide, that whether the time is right for us to sign, or India should sign the UN Convention or have a dedicated law for refugees or not. So you critically analyze and you discuss both sides, that why should we and why should we not. So that is the focus, and this can also be a possible question. Okay. So this is from the article where the writer says there should be a suitable legislation, since India is not a signatory to the UN Refugee Convention, nor does the country have a proper legislation dealing with domestic asylum framework. So in this context, let's get into a proper argument when it comes to what are the arguments for and what are the arguments against. Okay, so what are the arguments? Now generally I've clubbed this together so that it's easier for you. The arguments that will be for signing the UN convention or the convention for refugees will also be somewhat similar to establishing or having a proper legislature. So these are general arguments for the two of them, that is a convention as well as a designated legislation. Let's understand these arguments. The first argument being that we need a well-defined framework to basically know what is the obligation of the state, what is the state should provide or not. It should not be an ad hoc arrangement that today we allowed certain section of refugees to come, we allowed certain section of refugees to come from only a certain countries. These are the benefits that we provided to few types of refugees. These are the benefits that we did not provide to few types of refugees. So that is a difference. It is done on an ad hoc manner, it is done on an arbitrary manner. So a kind of a legislation or any signing of the convention will have proper framework laid out that these are the methods to be followed, these are the obligation on you as a nation state. So well-defined framework defining the obligation of the state will be better because it will lessen any arbitrary action or any ad hoc arrangement particularly. Clear? So that's point number one. Point number two, standardization and transparency. Standardization and transparency is almost the same, that everything will be provided in terms of what are the rules to be followed. As of now, there are a lot of cases of illegal detention also. There are a lot of cases where there is no proper procedure that is given in terms of how do you detain a person, in terms of how do you deport a person. So a lot of these refugees are at the mercy of the authorities, and the authorities sometimes could be misusing the lack of provisions, the lack of rules given, and therefore would lead to a lot of illegal pushing of the people in detention camps. So this would bring about transparency in the process. This would bring about accountability in the process when it comes to dealing with refugees. Okay, and reduce the power of the authorities, and therefore will reduce the instances of misuse of the powers of the authority. Okay, statement 3, which is an argument for, is it will lead to certain kind of recognition, certain kind of law will help in enhancing the access that will be given to them in order to avail basic facilities. For instance, the framework or the convention will say that these are few minimum, basic, bare minimum facilities that you must provide to a refugee that is seeking an asylum in your country. Okay, there will be more adherence to rules such as the non-refoulement principle that we had talked about. So there will be stricter implication if you are following that principle or not. So that will of course be a benefit. The other argument is that it is going to enhance India's prestige in the global order. It will enhance India's prestige in the international organization. It will be seen as a country which is for the humanitarian, which wants to stand up for the humanitarian crisis that is the refugee situation. So that is also important in terms of the arguments for. So enhancing prestige in the international organization, and because of being a signatory, we can also be beneficiaries of the funds that we can take from the UN Refugee Agency. So that is also an advantage for us, why we should sign the convention. The fourth is the proposed, another thing that the author or the writer proposes is that how you have your NHRC to deal with human rights, how you have your National Commission for Women to deal with specifically rights violation related to women. You must also have a dedicated body called the National Commission for Asylum, which is specifically looking into these aspects or non-fulfillment of these aspects. So these are instances or arguments, simple arguments why India should have a proper dedicated legislation, or why India should be a signatory to the UN Convention for Refugees. Now, this is not a plain simple argument. If there are arguments for and the country has not been a signatory, there might be certain reasons why India is not signing. So in your answers, it is also important for you to basically give that side, which is arguments against? What are the arguments against the signing of the particular convention? The first and the foremost argument, of course, is national security concerns. If we open up our borders a lot, if we allow a lot in terms of, if we have lesser control. So what happens after you sign a convention is that you will have to fulfill the obligations under that convention. So the country has lesser control. The country will have to give access to certain refugees, will have to follow a certain procedure. In that context, what happens is it reduces the ability of the national government. It reduces the ability to scan for any misuse when it comes to illegal entry, to basically check if there are any infiltrators, anyone related to terrorist activities per se, that maybe is misusing this kind of entry when it comes to a refugee situation. So national security concerns, of course, are a big issue. We have to be considerate of the same, that these provisions, access to refugees, better access to refugees, can also be, any good deed can be misused by other factors or non-state actors, etc. So this could lead to easy infiltration or illegal entry, and we are a country which is troubled a lot by the transboundary issue of terrorism as well as non-state actors. So we have to be very particular. The government has to be given access, the autonomy to decide who can be entering the country and what is the degree of assistance that we want to provide to that particular refugee. So that is national security concern. The second is resource strain. As we had talked about the Assam Accord, there is, of course, resources are limited, they are finite. Land is limited. We are already experiencing the problem of land fragmentation. Most of our farmers are, 80% of our farmers are small and marginal farmers owning less than 2 hectares of land. So already land is under pressure. There is a lot of pressure when it comes to water scarcity. In fact, Delhi currently, as we speak, is battling a huge water crisis. So what will happen if we allow, and we are obviously, don't forget that we are also the most populous country. We already have a huge population to feed in terms of food security, in terms of land availability, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of services. So if you allow for more refugees to come in, that can be strained. The resources can be strained, and there could be a little bit of a problem when it comes to the competition. So we already have a lot to do. We are still a developing country. We don't currently have the capacity to allow a lot of refugees or give assistance to a lot of refugees. So this is something that you will write. You can already give all the examples that I had spoken about. For instance, land availability, water scarcity being a problem. Here you can talk about battling terrorism and how this can be misused, easier access can be misused. So you can feel free to write these examples that I am giving in the course of the discussion. Okay, so this increases the burden on already existing infrastructure, services, etc. The third is backlash internally. Again, this comes from the resource strain argument that there can be huge backlash in India of the local population. They could feel threatened by the entry of outsiders. They could feel threatened that they will have to be competing for resources with the refugees per se. For instance, as we had observed in the situation when it comes to the Assam Accord, they were against the entry of the Bengali speaking population from Bangladesh, which was entering Bangladesh during the time of the making of Bangladesh. So that is the backlash also is a problem, and this backlash can lead to a lot of protests, and protests are generally not good for your internal, and generally a lot of protests, sometimes also these protests or that anger can take up the action or can take up the form of violent struggle against the state. So that can be a huge internal security challenge as well for us. Okay, country sovereignty and autonomy to decide matters can be hampered, as we had discussed in the national security concerns point. The sovereignty, the country should be able to, should not be forced, should not be dictated to take any decision when it comes to who it allows access to in the country or not, and that is country's sovereignty, the autonomy that the country enjoys, and this should not be hampered, which can be if we are forced, if we have to adhere to a certain principle, if we have to adhere to a certain kind of assistance to be given, and therefore this is an argument that you can give against the signing or against a dedicated policy. Clear? So these are the arguments against particularly. Now, in the light of this discussion, there's a simple question. In the light of the refugee crisis in South Asia, and here you can particularly understand India and areas around India, the countries that we had discussed using the map, you can simply draw a map of India very briefly on the side, box it and use it for your MCQ answers. It will fetch you a lot of marks. Is it time for India to sign the UN Convention on Refugees and have a dedicated legislation for refugees? Now, please focus on the word, like how I had discussed yesterday. The word is critically analyze. Critically analyze means that the question is asking for your opinion. The question just asked for your opinion. The question is not giving you the light that this should be done only. Elaborate generally is that you elaborate in the direction of the question. Okay, critically analyze is you give both sides to an argument, that whether what are the arguments for us to sign, what are the arguments for us to refrain. So both sides can be done. So in the beginning you can talk about the in general what is a refugee. The definition of a refugee can be done, or you can give simply, and here you can draw the map of India in a box, and you can talk about the Chakmas being here, the Rohingyas being here, the Tibetans from here, the Sri Lankan Tamils from here, and you can draw a map showing this kind of a refugee situation when it comes to India particularly. Clear? Then when you talk about the convention, then you write that what are the arguments simply. A 10-marker questions will not require you to write any more. So you write about the arguments for and the arguments against. A simple table with the two would be enough. And at the end you can write that yes, it is a big humanitarian crisis and it is the responsibility of the world or the global of all the countries together in order to aid in the assistance of the refugees, but it also has to be balanced with concepts or with concepts such as sovereignty and national autonomy per se. Okay, so that can be a balancing argument that yes, you have recognized that there is a need to address it, but you have also played it safe by giving the other side of the argument. Just a summary of the two arguments per se. Clear about this? So this is a very good way of doing the question. You have briefly, and that is why this kind of a diagram will also not take up a lot of space. So many times you are running out of space in a 10-marker question, or you have to make it quick. A diagram will also fetch you more marks because it is better presentation. Let's move to our next topic now. The next topic is around the situation. So I've clubbed two articles together. One is the torrid crisis. The other is the Indian cities, particularly when it comes to heat waves. Let's discuss this. So the torrid crisis is simply talking about the intense heat wave that has been the longest stretch, that has been going on for a very long time. It is witnessed in North India, in northwestern parts of India, and it is considered the longest stretch of heat waves in the last 15 years. These kind of pointers can be your best introductory pointers. Do not miss these kind of pointers. Okay, so they have been consistently, the states in these regions have been recording a temperature of more than 45 degrees Celsius, and therefore there is a lot of concern about why are these heat waves intensifying, why is there a prolonged period, and that is why. So first we will do a little bit about heat waves, and then we will dive into the second topic which is related to this, but that was a different article, which is a very favorite topic of UPSC called urban heat island effect. This has been a mains MCQ. mains question in 2013. So this is the focus of UPSC, and that is why it's talking about how Indian cities, the heat wave is experienced far more badly or adversely in the Indian cities. What are the reasons? And in one of the reasons, we talk about the urban heat island effect. Okay, so let's discuss this. Even on 17th of June, there was a small piece of news where the Power Ministry had said that the highest demand in North India in a single day was experienced, and that was about 89 gigawatts of power, of course, owing to a lot of cooling demand when it comes to air conditioners, etc. So these are the implications of heat waves, but we are not getting into the implications because that was not the focus of today's argument. Let's understand what are the heat waves first. Heat waves are a period of unusually high temperature. So usual high temperature, but unusually high temperature. Now please understand that these heat waves are generally considered or are declared after a comparison. So first and foremost, is there a heat wave for every place? Is the heat wave criteria the same? The answer is no. Okay, the criteria differ according to the base level. How you have base level for GDP, here the base level will be that certain states, for instance the plains, usually have higher temperature. So the criteria for heat wave in the plains will be higher. The hilly regions will usually have lesser temperature than the plains. So the criteria for heat wave will be lower for heat waves and not as high as the plains. So it is according to the comparison of a particular area, the usual temperature of a particular area. So heat waves are a period of unusually high temperature as compared to, please focus on the word, as compared to what is normally expected over a region. Therefore, it is correct to say that the heat waves are differ. The heat waves which are declared, they differ from place to place based on the temperature climatology. That is, what is a region already experiencing? What is the region's already normal? According to that, what is the change, the degree of change particularly from the normal? Okay, so the impact of heat waves, so that is why it is according to region. What are the differences? Heat wave is considered if maximum temperature of a station reaches at least 40 degrees or more. So for plains it is 40 degrees of more, like how I said, it is different, and for hilly regions it is 30 degree or more, because hilly regions usually will have lesser or cooler temperatures as compared to plains. So the heat wave criteria is also lesser. Okay, it's based on a normal also. How much deviation, how much does it deviate from the normal? That can also be a consideration or way of checking if a heat wave is. If the normal temperature, the departure from the normal temperature is more than 4.5 degrees or 6.4 degrees from the normal temperature, then it could be considered a heat wave. Is it based on actual temperatures also? Yes, it is based on actual temperatures also, irrespective of the region of what you are experiencing initially or normally. If the temperature is beyond 45 degrees, irrespective of the region, it is considered a heat wave. So one is a region specific differentiation, one is a degree, the degree of deviation specific differentiation, and one is a absolute specific definition. I hope this is clear. Now let's dive into factors that are contributed to these extended or prolonged periods particularly. Of course, the first factor can be described very easily. We are battling the issue of global warming, which is basically happening because of the rise in greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions trap a lot of heat that is radiated from the earth back to the atmosphere, and that gets trapped because of the greenhouse gas emissions, leading to a lot of heat that is generated, or basically leading to higher temperature. And that is why we have been there are multiple conventions, there are multiple for instance, the Paris climate deal is also about reducing the emissions of greenhouse gas emissions, increasing using renewable energy or greener transport solutions so that greenhouse gas emissions are reduced, and we can achieve the objective of keeping the rise in temperature below 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees by the end of it. So that is the agenda, but there is global warming that has been experienced in different parts of the country, in different parts of the world, and that is also leading to the intensification of the heat wave problem. The second issue, or the second factor that generally contributes to heat waves, is related to geographical location. Where is a particular area situated which is experiencing the heat wave? For instance, you will always see that the heat waves, the occurrence of heat waves is much lesser in coastal areas, the areas that are adjoining the sea, versus heat wave or temperatures are higher in interior areas. That is the concept of continentality. The interiors are generally heating up much more than the coastal areas. Why? Because the coastal areas are under the influence of the sea, the direct influence of the sea, and therefore receive a lot of sea breeze, which adds to the cooling. It also, the sea, the water basically cools, it heats up slowly as compared to land. Land heats up very, very quickly, thereby leading to, so the interiors generally are hotter, or they are warmer as compared to the coastal areas. So continentality also, the geographical location also has a lot to do. That is why even when you see right now, it is confined to the northern areas, the northern plains, as well as the northwestern areas, which are continental regions, which are interior regions. Okay, so they lack the cloud cover. Now what happens also because of the cloud cover is, why do they lack the cloud cover? A lot of cloud formation happens because of humidity, or because of the evaporation of water, okay, which is around the sea regions. So the coastal regions will have a lot of humidity, the coastal regions will have a lot of evaporation of water from the seas, thereby leading to a lot of clouds. The clouds in a way will block the direct rays of the sun, thereby reducing the heating of a particular region. The cloud cover also adds to more precipitation, which adds to a cooling effect in the region. So lack of cloud cover, unlike coastal areas, therefore makes the region open to the direct rays of the sun, and therefore it adds to heating. The continentality, or the influence of the sea is heating. Land will heat faster. That also can be written as a reason. Land heat will heat faster. Okay, the third reason is delayed monsoons. So delayed monsoons or rains are generally providing a respite when it comes to heat waves. People wait after these summer months, that is April, May and June, for the monsoon to strike. But the monsoon in the northwestern parts of India or northern parts of the country takes some time. The monsoon first strikes Kerala and then starts proceeding to the northern latitudes. So delayed monsoons also, in fact, IMD also has particularly mentioned right now that the rainfall for the month of June is considered below normal. It is considered a deficient monsoon when it comes to the month of June particularly. So below normal rainfall has been witnessed for the month of June, thereby leading to also a problem of prolonged heat wave. Otherwise, one monsoon shower also provides some sort of respite. Okay, El Nino, of course, that is the change in global patterns, global weather patterns. A disruption in global weather patterns are also associated with heat related conditions in India. For instance, El Nino, which is the warming of the Pacific Ocean, is considered, there is a link that is considered with El Nino. Whenever an El Nino event is happening, the link is that there will be reduction in rainfall that India experiences, and therefore would lead to more warmer temperatures in India. So this will disrupt and therefore lead to low rainfall in India, thereby also creating to the prolonged heat waves. The fifth is the urban heat island effect. That why does this problem of heat wave particularly worsens or adversely affects Indian cities? Okay, so how are cities battling or the heat much more than rural areas? That is because of a particular phenomena that we will do in the next slide, which is the urban heat island effect. That was the second That was the second particular article, but this is the connectivity. So we've discussed heat wave, we've discussed in general factors affecting heat wave. We will pick up an important factor from here, discuss it a little further. Okay, so urban heat island effect has been a question, as I had mentioned, in mains 2013. Okay, urban heat island effect occurs. Now it is a phenomena. It is a phenomena when the cities experience more warmer temperatures, hotter temperatures as compared to the adjoining areas of the cities. Okay, so for instance, it will be the area or the land is receiving the same amount of solar insolation, right? So why is it that the cities are experiencing warmer temperatures as compared to the adjoining areas? This is what is the heat island effect, and we will get into the factors that are contributing to the urban heat island effect. Okay, so urban heat island effect, as a simple definition, occurs when a city experiences much warmer temperatures than the nearby adjoining areas or the nearby rural areas. Okay, let's discuss why is that so. The first and the foremost reason which is obviously easy for you to predict is also deforestation. Deforestation is a big reason why urban areas experience higher temperatures. Rural areas will be full with agroforestry, rural areas will be full with a lot of crops that are grown, a lot of farming activity that is taking place, a lot of soil that is exposed, less concretization, etc. So what happens because of less greenery or green plants generally are responsible for transpiration. The transpiration is basically related to the release of water vapor. So when they release water vapor through their particular leaves, it leads to a cooling effect in the particular region. Okay, and they are technically considered, green plants and trees are considered nature's air conditioners. They will provide shade. They will also lead to more water vapor in the environment by transpiration, and therefore will lead to a cooling effect. So when you cut down a lot of trees, you're just building infrastructure and buildings and roads and concrete structures. You are basically making the area prone to more heat as compared to the adjacent areas. Okay, so lack of green cover is a big factor in cities that leads to warmer temperatures. The second problem is the problem of concretization. What do you mean by concretization? A lot of infrastructure, everything is built, no space is left in terms of normal soil where the land is exposed. In fact, concretization is also a reason for a lot of flash floods in the cities. The water is not absorbed. So what happens because of concretization is that there is a lot of building activities. In rural areas, you will see a lot of land which is left free. Buildings are not put or made next to each other. There is a lot of free space. Okay, with concretization is that there are buildings that are made using materials such as asphalt, steel, bricks, etc. that lead to or they absorb a lot of heat. Okay, so this concretization, the infrastructure made using these concrete structures, they absorb a lot of heat and therefore leads to a higher temperature in these areas. Okay, the other problem is also that when you expose normal soil to water, so even when there is a rain or there is surface runoff, a lot of water is absorbed by the soil, and the absorbed water by the soil almost leads to a cooling effect. Here, because of concretization or impervious structure. What do you mean by impervious structure? That the water cannot flow through in these concrete structure. The pavements that are made, the roads that are made, the buildings that are made, everything is made into concrete. No soil exposure is left. So in that context, water absorption is extremely less, and cooling water or cool soil also adds to a cooling effect in that particular region. So this is a big problem because of the excessive building demand. A lot of city layouts in terms of also developers, no free spaces are left, no green spaces are left, everything is concretized, and therefore it leads to a problem. The third is urban canyon geometry. What are canyons? The canyons are areas which are caused by the erosion of rivers. So big canyons are formed with very steep sides. What is it that cities are replicating that kind of a landscape? How? We have very high-rise buildings close to each other, stacked close to each other. If those are the structures in your cities, where will air flow from? Will there be wind circulation? The air will stagnate. The air will stagnate when a lot of buildings are made next to each other. And there will be hardly any air circulation, which sometimes leads to lessening of the temperature. Good winds or air circulation leads to lessening of warmer temperatures, but this cannot happen because of the multiple buildings that you have made. So multiple high-rise buildings will trap the heat. Will trap the heat since there will be no air circulation. The high-rise buildings do not allow for such air circulation, and therefore stagnant air will lead to more or warmer temperatures. The fourth is also the heat created more in cities as compared to rural areas. The demand is concentrated. A lot of population is residing in very small areas that are your cities. And those people, for instance, even one building would have a minimum of 100 ACs. This is also something I'm saying less. All the balconies, all those areas, the ACs that are running will produce a lot of heat. A lot of industries are set up in these cities. Those industries are also taking up or doing their industrial processes, leading to a lot of heat generation. So heat is generated also using vehicles, which lead to a lot of pollutants, etc. So these are also, because these are populated regions, there is a lot of demand for the usage of ACs, there is a lot of demand for the usage of vehicles, thereby leading to more waste heat that is accumulated. Clear? So that is the agenda. Like you would have noticed, if there is a compressor of your AC that is in your balcony, you go there, the balcony will be a little more heated. That is nothing but waste heat. So we are not just using our cooling requirement. Just see the irony. We are using ACs to fulfill our cooling requirement, but the ACs in turn are adding more to the urban heat particularly. Okay, so that is the agenda for heat islands. Now this is the question, what is a heat wave? Simply please understand or answer what a heat wave is. You could add maybe just one structure. So you could define a heat wave, a time of prolonged rise in temperatures, which is a deviation from the normal. You can talk about the criterias of IMD, that is a change or 40 degrees plus for plains or 30 degrees plus for hilly areas, and then you could get into the second portion is important. Once you've defined a heat wave simply, you can also write simple factors like global warming, deficient monsoon, etc., continentality, and just after doing this, then you dive into the urban heat island effect. In this context, discuss urban heat island effect aggravates the problem of heat waves in metro cities. Discuss. Okay, so that is the question. In this context, discuss how this adds to or aggravates the problem of summers or heat when it comes to cities in India. Why is it an island? The term written in the heat island effect, because an island is something which is different from the surrounding areas. So that is why it says that urban heat or the heat experienced or the temperatures in urban areas are higher. The temperatures in urban areas are higher than the adjoining areas. Okay, so that is why it is considered as an island of abnormal temperature or abnormally high temperature. Okay, and then with the conclusion you can also write that you can write the possible outcomes, or you can write how heat waves is affecting everyone, and therefore because the agenda was urban islands, so you could say the solutions should be land use planning or particularly urban planning, more green spaces, afforestation, and also building codes that focus on natural ventilation and lesser cooling demand. So that is the agenda. That could be a way forward where you're writing a few solutions when it comes to city planning or urban planning per se. Clear? So that is the question that we've discussed. Now let's come to our prelims tidbits and do this quickly. This was an article which was about the Hindu Kush mountains, and a term that you must know if it is asked as a definition in prelims as well. That is, what is snow persistence? What is snow persistence? Snow persistence is the fraction of time the snow is on the ground. So the snow will accumulate because of precipitation. When it's solidified, it forms into ice or snow cover. So snow persistence is the fraction of time, the time, how long does the snow remains on the ground before it starts melting. So snow persistence, persistence as the word says, persists, it will stay. So snow persistence is the fraction of time snow is on the ground. When it melts, it basically feeds a lot of rivers that we are dependent on in terms of agriculture, water supply, etc. Okay, so when the snow melts, it provides water to people and ecosystems. A lot of river basins are fed by this melting snow. Okay, so what this particular article was just talking about, and that is why it's given a figure, that the snow persistence for most of the regions of the Hindu Kush mountains or the Hindu Kush Himalayas is decreasing. If that is decreasing, it will have an impact on the melting of snow. It will have an impact on the supply, the water supply in the rivers. The prominent rivers being the Ganga river system, the Brahmaputra river system, not just India, because Hindu Kush as a mountain system is spanning, it is spanning a lot of countries, not just India. So it will also have an impact on the Mekong river system, for instance. These are the examples that are given. Amur Darya also, as we know, these are the examples. So that is why it says that it contributes, the snow contributes about 32% of the runoff to the region's 12 most important regions, the rivers, and these are, where are the Hindu Kush Himalayas? This can also be a PYQ, this can also be an MCQ. Where are the Himalayas or the Hindu Kush Himalayas? These are the range countries. These are the range countries for the Hindu Kush Himalayas. Of course, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan on the west, Nepal, China, Bhutan, Bangladesh and Myanmar. So it will feed these areas. These are also called the water towers. What do you mean by water towers? These are the source for a lot of rivers that are originating from these regions for different countries. So these are also called the water towers of Asia because it is the origin of a lot of rivers, important rivers such as Amur Darya, Ganga, Brahmaputra, Mekong, etc. It's very, very important because this region as a region to study is very important because it is almost catering to the water requirement of 1/4 of the world's population. That is extremely huge. So whenever you are writing an answer on, for instance, glaciers, or you're writing an answer about the snow-capped region of Hindu Kush Himalayas, you can use these as intro points to talk about the significance of the Hindu Kush Himalayas for us in general. Okay, so that was the agenda. The snow persistence is reducing because of multiple factors. For instance, there is a disruption in weather patterns. The western disturbances that are responsible for precipitation or snow accumulation in these regions are not regular. They are disturbed because of the El Nino conditions as well. There is the problem of higher temperature, global warming, climate change, etc. But that is not to be discussed a lot. Even if you know the term snow persistence, what does it mean? Where are the Hindu Kush Himalayas spanning, in which all countries, and in general what are the rivers associated with it? So make sure that you know all these particular rivers, at least that they are associated with the Hindu Kush Himalayas. Okay, let's come to our next topic for prelims. This was on page 1 of Hindu, that is 2 one-horned rhinos in the Pobitara Wildlife Sanctuary. So it is important to know what is the Pobitara Wildlife Sanctuary, where is it located, what are the important pointers for prelims. So Pobitara Wildlife Sanctuary is situated in the state of Assam on the southern bank of Brahmaputra. It is a very important habitat for the one-horned rhinos. Okay, in fact it has, please remember this point, it has the highest density of the one-horned rhinos in India. Do not confuse it with Kaziranga. Kaziranga has the highest number of one-horned rhinos, but Pobitara has the highest density. Density being the number of rhinos in a given areas. Okay, so that is a density related term. So highest density of one-horned rhino is in Pobitara, highest number of one-horned rhinos is in Kaziranga. It is very, very similar in terms of landscape, in terms of rivers, grasslands, savanna, etc. Like Kaziranga, situated close to Kaziranga, the similarity in landscape also makes it, the term we used for Pobitara is also mini Kaziranga. Mini Kaziranga. Most of the vegetation there or the landscape there is basically defined by wet savannas. As you would see in the pictures also, this is the river, and here next to it you will see a lot of grasslands, which is your savannas. So that is the characteristics of Pobitara. This is all that you need to know. When it comes to one-horned rhino, please note the IUCN status of the same. The first thing, the IUCN status is vulnerable. Okay, the second part is the highest number, as we had done, of one-horned rhinos are found in the Kaziranga National Park, which is also situated in Assam. Now, are they only found in Assam region? Are one-horned rhinos only found in West Bengal, Assam region? The answer is no. Please do not confuse this fact. They are also found in the Terai belts. They are found in the Terai regions, which is similar landscapes such as this, such as high grasslands, a little bit of rivers that are crossing the grasslands, and therefore you will also find the one-horned rhinos in the state of UP, Uttar Pradesh. I know this is a different fact, but please remember that you can also find one-horned rhinos in some areas or protected areas of UP, such as the Dudhwa National Park or the Pilibhit National Park, which are in the Terai belt regions, that is the floodplains where the rivers break and there is a lot of submerged conditions. Okay, so they are found in the Terai belts, in also areas Assam and West Bengal, you'd know, but also UP. Please remember, the important protected areas when it comes to the one-horned rhinos are Pobitara in Assam, Orang National Park again in Assam, Manas National Park again in Assam, and Kaziranga we've already done. So those are important prelims, facts and pointers when it comes to the one-horned rhinos. Let's come to another important news article. India eyes breakthrough against sickle cell or sickle cell anemia. What is sickle cell anemia? Let's understand that. That could be a PYQ, that could be an MCQ question, and that is why it is important to know a little bit about that particular disease. It is a blood disorder. Okay, it is a blood disorder and it is an inherited genetic disorder. Okay, so it is an inherited genetic blood disorder. By genetic, you would mean that it happens or it occurs because of a mutation in the genes, a mutation in the DNA. Okay, and it is generally inherited. It is inherited disorder. The first point that you need to know. Why? What is the disorder? The disorder is in the type or the shape of the red blood cells, RBCs. So RBCs are generally oval or a little circular for us, but the RBCs of a person suffering from sickle cell anemia will be in the form of a crescent shape, a sickle, and therefore this kind of a form, this kind of a shape makes the RBC more prone to easier destruction as compared to the normal shaped RBC. So sickle cell shaped RBCs are easier, they get easily destructed, and therefore it can also lead to a lot of blood flow, a problem in blood flow, leading to a lot of problems such as pain, leading to a lot of problems such as the lack of blood flow and the failure of organs or a heart stroke, etc. in people. So sickle cell is related to the change in the RBC shapes per se. Okay, if there is a statement in prelims where they ask you, or if they frame a statement that the sickle cell anemia is prevalent, the prevalence of sickle cell anemia disease is more prevalent in the tribal population? The answer is absolutely yes. Please mark that option as correct. In fact, a lot of screening programs are prominent in the tribal majority districts in order to check that which are the tribals which are suffering from the sickle cell anemia. So it is highly prevalent in the tribals of India. There are multiple reasons, such as the lack of diversity. Tribals are generally forming kinship groups. There are instances of inbreeding, particularly, or breeding not with a genetically diverse individual, and that could lead to a lot of these inherited disorder. Okay, does India have an elimination target? Yes, India has an elimination target. We want to eliminate the sickle cell anemia by the year 2047. So that is about the sickle cell anemia disease. Now, what is the article here? The article here is about that there is a gene therapy. Okay, we are developing a gene therapy using the CRISPR-Cas9. What is CRISPR-Cas9? CRISPR-Cas9 is a gene editing tool. In fact, it's called a biomolecular scissor. It has the ability, so whenever there is a piece of DNA and there is a mutation in one piece of DNA that is causing the sickle cell anemia, this particular tool can basically cut that portion of DNA. And replace that with another specific genetic code in that site in order to fix the problem. Okay, so this is a molecular biological scissors, and it can basically help in cutting or removing or reversing the genetic mutation. Okay, by specifically cutting that part of the DNA which is causing the mutation, or which has the mutation that is causing the disease. So CRISPR-Cas9 technology, remember it in that form. Okay, the technology is the new gene therapy is being developed by which particular organization? That can be important as well. It has been developed by the CSIR, Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology, that is IGIB. So this can also be important, that they are developing the gene therapy when it comes to solving or figuring out or basically tackling the problem of sickle cell anemia. So that is all that you need to know when it comes to this. Rest, when it's done properly, when it's in the news, then we will discuss it again. Okay. The other important fact is diseases with higher burden in Asia and Africa lack research funding. In this, you just have to know what is that particular term called neglected tropical diseases. What are NDs? Neglected tropical diseases could be caused by various factors. They could be bacterial, they could be viral, they could be fungal, etc. Okay, these are basically prevalent. The prevalence of these neglected tropical diseases, as the word suggests, is in more of the tropical regions or the subtropical regions. It so happens that these tropical regions are also developing countries. Yes. So these tropical regions are also developing countries. These are also poor income countries. And therefore, the prevalence also is high. The health burdens are higher. The disease prevalence in these regions are higher. So that is, the tropical is referring to the region where it is more prevalent. Neglected is telling you, neglected, the word N in the neglected tropical diseases is telling you that there is, as compared to funding, as compared to research, as compared to intervention, when it comes to other diseases, the research funding or intervention in these diseases, or even the resources that are spent, research, etc., that are spent on these diseases are much lesser as compared to the others. Okay, so it will, what are the prevalence? The prevalence is among the impoverished communities in the tropical areas. The two continents which are suffering from a lot of these neglected tropical diseases happen to be Asia and happen to be Africa. Okay, yes. And NTDs primarily affect population in the tropical and subtropical regions. They have received less attention and fewer resources, as we had discussed, and therefore they can be called neglected. Okay, it attracts less commercial investments, etc., and these lead to a big issue. The health related the higher health burden leads to the problem of poverty, a lot of problems of disability, and therefore an economic burden of the population that is already first impoverished. Okay, another important fact is, what are the reasons? The reasons are that these are poorest countries. These are developing countries, so they do not have enough resources in order to tackle these diseases. The second reason for them being neglected is that a lot of focus is given to the big three. What are the big three? In the prevalence or reducing the prevalence of HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. And because of this, the other diseases are neglected. Okay, and these also do not have a lot of data supporting it where the research can be particularly done. So data is also deficient when it comes to this. A lot of people, in fact 677 million people in India are facing treatment or are facing an issue with these diseases. Okay, in fact India had the maximum dengue related deaths where dengue was considered fatal. So dengue related deaths that were recorded in 2019. This was the graph given. Now please use this graph for an MCQ. Here are the neglected tropical diseases that are mentioned, such as dengue, such as Chagas disease, leishmaniasis, chikungunya, lymphatic filariasis, trachoma. If you've heard of trachoma, it is a leading cause of blindness in the tropical regions. Okay, so these are the disease. Leprosy is also something. India's had a dedicated program for the elimination of the same. So these are all mentioned. Just at least know the ones that are marked in blue are the neglected tropical diseases. A very different one is also snake bite. They can give you an MCQ where you are confused that why would snake bite be included. Snake bite is also considered as a neglected tropical diseases. Can you see the difference in funding? This chart basically talks about the difference in funding. Of course, COVID-19 was the need of the hour, had a lot of funding. As compared to that, HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria have had a lot of funding, but the other diseases have a lack of funding, lack of research, and a lack of intervention. Please make sure that you learn all of this for an important MCQ. Okay. Another important article, India-US working to scale up partnership on critical minerals. What do you need to know from this? All you need to know from this is the National Security Advisors, NSAs, okay, had met for a particular dialogue which is called the US-India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technology. So if there is a prelims MCQ, what is iCET? Or India conducts iCET with which country? So iCET is United States India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies. We will cooperate as two nations in the emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, semiconductors, and wireless telecommunication. All these new technologies are dependent on the supply of critical minerals. In fact, India has also taken out a list of the critical minerals. And therefore, this particular article is saying that in this dialogue, during this particular dialogue between India and US, we are talking about sourcing or exploring critical minerals together. India is also a part of the Mineral Security Partnership, which is led by USA. Okay, so this was established, iCET was established in 2002. It is a dialogue which is headed by the national security advisors of the two countries. Okay, so iCET, remember, as India and US. Some additional prelims facts being that what is considered the lithium triangle, an area which is high in terms of lithium reserves, are the regions of the Andes, and you can remember it as ABC. The countries of Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile are extremely they have very high lithium reserves, therefore this region being called a lithium triangle. Another prelims fact. Okay, the last prelims fact is when yesterday on Wednesday, Prime Minister inaugurated the newly constructed Nalanda University campus in Bihar. So in that context, Nalanda as an ancient center of learning becomes important. Just a few historical facts about it can also go a long way in helping you solve an MCQ. So Nalanda University, first things first, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was an ancient university, an ancient center of learning, which attracted a lot of travelers, including Huan Sang, which basically visited the Nalanda University and also has mentioned the Nalanda University in one of his write-ups. Okay, it was built by the king Kumaragupta of the Gupta dynasty in the 5th century. This region, or Nalanda, became extremely popular, more popular in the times of Harshvardhan and also the Palas. Okay, the admission process. So if there is an MCQ, that what was the admission like? Please note, if they have a statement that they say there was an entrance test, there used to be an entrance test for the Nalanda University, it is absolutely correct. The subjects that were generally taught in the Nalanda University were a lot. It was not just a Buddhist center of learning. Of course, all philosophies of Buddhism were taught, all schools of Buddhism were taught, but was it only restricted to Buddhism? No. Other subjects were also taught, such as arithmetic, grammar, astrology, etc. So please make sure that if there is an MCQ that says only Buddhist related education, that would be incorrect. So these will be enough for you to solve an MCQ. And of course, it is situated in the state of Bihar. Okay. So with this, we've come to an end for today. Thank you so much for joining in. If you have liked our initiative, please do not forget to pour your love. It really means a lot to us in the form of likes. Please share the videos, comment as much as you can. Let us know how you're feeling about these initiatives, and do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's a lot that we have planned for the coming months, and we'll need your support for the same. Thank you so much for joining us. I will see you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you.